morning, and thank you for joining us for a live talk with Katie today, who is a Youth Engagement Officer at the Marine Conservation Society, which is the UK's leading marine conservation charity. It's great to see so many schools and individuals joining us today. To celebrate National Careers Week, Katie will explain about the unusual route she took into conservation world and how she gained experience working with some of the most endangered species on the planet. Please feel free to ask any questions by putting them into the chat, and Katie will aim to answer as many as she can at the end of her talk. So that's enough from me. I will hand you over to Katie. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Lisa. Great. So it's lovely to have so many of you on the call today. My name's Katie McFarlane, and as Lisa said, I'm the Youth Engagement Officer for the Marine Conservation Society. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Marine Conservation Society, what I do, and a little bit about my kind of route into conservation, as we've already said. But the first thing to note is, if any of you on the call or any teachers or anyone else has Twitter, my Twitter account and Marine Conservation Society's Twitter account is down the bottom right there. So please tag us. We love to see your pictures and your feedback and your thoughts on our talks. So if you're on the call, you probably already know what a career is, but it's basically a job or a role working in some sort of area. Conservation is protecting, looking after, maybe saving, for example, in this case, wildlife. But we'll chat a wee bit more about what this means to us as we go on. So what does the Marine Conservation Society actually do? Perhaps you were thinking about this before you joined, perhaps you've heard about us before, and I hope that you look at our website after this call so that you can learn a wee bit more. So marine basically means anything associated with the ocean or the sea, so the creatures that live in it and the people that live around about it as well. And as I said, conservation is the protection. So we are a group of people who are working to protect the marine environment. And as I said, I'm going to chat a little bit about my route into this and all the different jobs you can have in conservation today. But simply put, the Marine Conservation Society are a UK charity fighting for a cleaner, better protected, healthier ocean that we can all enjoy. So we really fight for our ocean through people-powered action, and we use science on our side. So as I said, we are people-powered. We have lots of amazing people that work for us, that volunteer with us and make us who we are. So you might recognise a few famous faces on this screen. And these are some of our staff, some of our volunteers, some of our ocean ambassadors. You might recognise King Charles up the top left there, so formerly known as Prince Charles. He has been our president for a long time. But we have lots of amazing people, as I say, across the UK and the UK overseas territories. So if you can identify some cute little turtles in these images, these are actually my colleagues who get to work in the Caribbean as well, in the UK overseas territories. So it's not all just in the colder climates of the UK. We're a really passionate bunch of people, and as I said, we couldn't do what we do without all our amazing volunteers. So these group photos are a few examples of some of our beach events that we run, and it's really exciting and really fun when we all manage to get together. But you might also be thinking, what does the ocean actually do for us? Oh, let me go forward again. Is it really actually important to our day-to-day lives? If you don't live near the coast, or you don't get to go to the coast very often, you might not have been to the beach that much throughout your life. But quite often up here in Scotland anyway, people say it's quite cold. They don't go in it too often round about Scottish shores. It's really big. Does it actually make a difference to our day-to-day lives? Now, I'm biased, obviously, because I work for the Marine Conservation Society, but did you know that the ocean actually provides about 50% of the oxygen that we breathe? So you learn a lot about the rainforests and how much oxygen they produce for us, but every second breath that you take actually comes from the ocean. So it is full of tiny plant-like organisms called phytoplankton that you can see here in the picture, and these produce the oxygen along with algae and kelp through photosynthesis. So not only is the ocean central to creating oxygen for us to breathe, it's also central to the water cycle. So even if you live near a river, a stream, a lake or a loch, it's all connected, and it all helps keep us healthy and alive. So water and oxygen, two pretty important things, I hope you agree, to keep us alive on planet Earth. But also it does so much more than this. The climate is actually controlled by the ocean. About 70% of the Earth is ocean. So we kind of say sometimes that it should probably be called planet ocean, not planet Earth. But it's also incredibly important to international travel and trade and transportation. If you're watching at home or at school, you might have a fridge or a freezer in your house. You might have a car in your family. These have probably been built in a far off country and transported here to the UK via the sea. So it's really, really essential to loads of our little things in our daily lives. It's also a really important source of food for millions of people across the planet, and it provides loads and loads of jobs. So you can see in these pictures there's some fisher people, but also up the top left, that's some wildlife tours. I'm sure some of you have maybe been out on a boat or on a ferry around about the UK. And also in the background, you can see some paddle boards and surfers. It's just really fun and really great. It's good for us I feel if we spend time by water, and we like to call it blue mind, because it's really important for both our physical but our mental health to not only be out in nature but be by water. So hopefully that's emphasised that the ocean is actually vital to our survival. It's incredibly important and it keeps the planet nice and healthy. And I also like to just show this image, which is a bit confusing at first, but if you have a look, the centre bit there, that's actually Antarctica. So imagine you're looking at planet Earth from the bottom up. This is Antarctica, this is Australia, this is Africa, and Britain's just up here. So it just emphasises that actually it's one big ocean. You'll hear me using the term ocean, not oceans, but it's all connected and it's one big body of water. So something that you do if you drop a piece of litter by a river in the UK, it could go out into the ocean and end up on the other side of the planet. So again, just keep that in mind whenever you're thinking about any sort of marine conservation work. So at the Marine Conservation Society, we work in a few different areas. We collect science data, for example, habitat and litter surveys, and we carry out practical conservation work, for example, seagrass planting. We also speak to people of all ages, like I'm doing today, across the whole of the UK and the overseas territories to try and educate and inspire about how amazing our ocean is, but we also tell people about the threats that our ocean is sadly facing. And we also work with politicians and businesses to help change laws and hopefully create positive change for our ocean. And there are three main areas that we kind of focus on. So ocean recovery, we try and protect and restore our ocean. We're trying to look after it. We also have a focus on sustainable seafood. So there's a huge majority of the planet rely on seafood and work in the industry. So we work, for example, with local fisher people along with our Good Fish Guide. So this is a traffic-like system to make it easier for people to buy sustainably sourced seafood. And also we work on clean seas. So you've probably all learned a lot or know a lot about plastic pollution. It's a big problem that our ocean's facing, but also chemical pollution and all sorts of other dilemmas. We'll come back in a minute though to a little bit more about the Marine Conservation Society, but I just wanted to get everybody thinking, what do you think conservation is? What does it mean to you? If you think of a normal job or a role in conservation, what springs to mind? So if you're watching this back, you can maybe pause it here and have a little think. But conservation can mean there's so many different roles in conservation, and I hopefully will show you that in the next few slides. So I'm going to show you a few examples of jobs in conservation, and I actually know each and every one of the people in these pictures, so hopefully it will illustrate my varied background, and I've not just done marine conservation throughout my life. So conservation could be conservation of animals in the wild. So that could be, for example, here, this is my friend Julian, who works for the Giraffe Conservation Foundation, and they're actually working on the ground in Africa to protect and look after wild giraffe populations. And yes, that is a lorry full of giraffes there being transported. So that is a really fun and practical outdoor aspect of it. But it's also really important to remember that it's not just the animals that we're trying to protect, it's the habitat or the landscape that they live in. So this is my friend Denny, who works in Mauritius, and he helps to restore the landscape and the trees and the forests that all the animals that he works with live in. So the top right corner there, you can see a picture of beautiful Mauritius, but it's also got quite a lot of agriculture and farmland that means that there's not as much habitat for the animals to live in and thrive. So we've got to really help protect the landscapes and the habitat as well. So if you're interested in working with plants or trees or in the outdoors, you can maybe get into that side of conservation. Now, also, this is Romaine, my friend who's a vet, but all these animals are just asleep in these pictures, don't worry. Romaine is actually a wildlife vet or an exotic animal vet. So he obviously trained as a vet and now has managed to get loads of cool jobs all around the world working with all sorts of different animals. Now, I think we'll all agree that looks like a really amazing job. He's done a lot of hard work and many years to get there. But he works in zoos and aquariums around the world, but he also works with wildlife and conservation projects. Now, if you think about it, if you've got a pet at home that might go to the vet sometimes, when it comes home, you'll probably look after it and make sure it's nice and safe and calm. But if you're working with wildlife, you can't necessarily do that. So that top right image is a gibbon, for example, who had a broken arm, and Romaine knew that as soon as that gibbon went back out into the trees, it would want to use its arm again. So they have to really think when they're doing these procedures and these operations, you know, how best to deal with the fact that these animals are actually wild and how they're going to behave. So that's one kind of area of work you could maybe get into. As I said, though, you could also get involved in all sorts of practical work in conservation. So that's an image of me measuring a little baby tropic seabird, just measuring all its different dimensions to see if it's nice and fit and healthy. But also you could work as an animal carer. So you might want to look after animals, whether it's out in the wild or whether it's in a zoo or a safari park. And a lot of that involves collecting food and collecting poo and all sorts of physical work that is not so glamorous, but it's still great fun. And you can also get involved in tree planting, for example, up the top right there, with Trees for Life. And also research is another really important area. So research is studying and learning and gathering evidence, which will then help us protect the different animals and habitats that we're trying to look after. It's really important that we collect all sorts of information as well. So these are some images in marine conservation, for example. We work with thousands of volunteers across the UK who really help us gather data. So gather information on beaches so that we can use both the good and the bad information to make a change for our environment. And I might be biased, but education is also a really cool area that you could work in conservation. It's really important that we teach both young people and older people all about the importance of protecting our planet. Now, obviously, I am part of the education team. It's my job to teach people about our work. So but I wanted to tell you a little bit about my route in and how I got to this position. So if we go back about 30 years, this is the little 4-year-old Katie on the beach on the west coast of Scotland. I was quite a shy girl, believe it or not. I loved dinosaurs. I loved art, and I'm from a big musical family, so I really enjoyed getting involved in music. I also spent a lot of time outdoors with my family. We'd go and visit different parks and beaches and gardens. I also was a dancer. I really loved dancing right throughout my whole childhood. And I loved just getting outdoors and playing with my friends on my bike and my brothers and sisters. So I spent a lot of time outdoors in the summer in particular. So these things, if you look at these things, they might not seem very relevant to my job today, but hopefully as we go through the talk, you'll realise they all are quite important. And some of the skills that I developed earlier in my life, like dancing and performing on stage, have actually been really useful because I get up in front of audiences all the time now. So when I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a paleontologist. I wanted to study dinosaurs. When I was about 14 years old, I wanted to be a professional ballet dancer. And then fast forward to about 17, I was finishing school and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I decided to take a couple of years out and just work. So I actually got a job working in a museum in my local town. And this museum was focusing on history and teaching the public about history. So after working there for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to go and study archaeology. So archaeology is the study of human history. So basically through excavation and digging up all sorts of remains, you learn about the past. Now, I went to Edinburgh University And I think it's important to point out that in Scotland, we get our tuition fees paid for, we get loads of financial support. I wouldn't have been able to go to university if it wasn't for that. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to go. I got to go travel around Europe and do loads of really cool practical work, digging up and finding all sorts of amazing objects. And as you can see in the middle picture, it's not the most glamorous, a lot of mud, a lot of big warm clothing, a lot of waterproof clothing, but I really loved being outside. And I graduated, that's me and some of my family there, after 4 years, and I'd learnt so much throughout those 4 years, which I'll talk about in a minute. But while I was at university in Edinburgh, I also took the opportunity to start volunteering. So I volunteered with various organisations such as the RSPB and Gorgie City Farm, which was working with animals in a city farm in Edinburgh. I also volunteered as an education volunteer at Edinburgh Zoo, so because I wanted to get involved in teaching people about animals. And also I love working with children. So I volunteered in the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Edinburgh as well. So even though I had this passion for history, I was still really interested in the animal side of it as well. So I actually focused my degree quite a lot on archaeozoology, which is the study of extinct species. But if I step back and think about those 4 years at university, what skills had I developed? So all of these are really important in the bigger picture to add to our CV if you're trying to get jobs in the future. So I had a degree, I had an MA in archaeology. I had a good knowledge of history and the environment. I developed an ability to present and talk in front of people and lots of outdoor skills. And also through my volunteering, I'd worked with lots of children and the public. So when I finished my degree, I actually was really lucky. I got a job in the National Museum of Scotland. So this was a job focusing more on visitor engagement and education. But because I really love talking to people, I was really excited. And I actually worked there for 3.5 years. So I learned a great deal about all sorts of different topics. But again, I still had this in the back of my head. I still really wanted to work with animals. I really wanted a change after about 3.5 years. So I was looking into different masters, different qualifications, courses I could do, thinking, how can I work with animals? That's what I really want to do. So actually, the opportunity that came up, this is a map of where we are in the UK. I actually got an opportunity really far off in the Indian Ocean in a little island called Mauritius. So I got the opportunity to complete a 6-month course in this beautiful paradise called, which you might have seen before. It's a very famous holiday destination from the UK, but I got accepted as one of 12 students from all over the world to complete a course. So this wasn't focusing on marine conservation, this was focusing on terrestrial, so land animals. And as these pictures show, I got to work with all sorts of really cool creatures, lots of different species of birds, reptiles. I particularly love the giant tortoises. There's fruit bats in Mauritius as well, snakes. So I completed 6 months of field work, but also classroom work as well. So it wasn't all just out in the sunshine with cool animals. And I learned a great deal about some of the most endangered species on the planet. So the kestrel up the top, kind of right there, you can see the bird. The Mauritian kestrel was actually in the 70s one of the most endangered bird in the world. There were only about 4 of them left on the planet, they believed. But because of the work of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, they've now got back to a really healthy population. So I was really lucky to learn about all these really unusual and endangered animals. And I had a great time, obviously, while I was there. But it wasn't all just fun and games, as I say. There was lots, I did get a qualification out of it. There was lots of practical work, but a lot of theoretical as well, a lot of research, a lot of classroom time, a lot of study time because I had to complete projects. But it was really interesting as well to work with people who speak other languages. English is spoken in Mauritius, but French is the first language, and lots of different cultures. I really developed my research skills and got all that hands-on experience with wildlife. But I also developed a love for teaching children about conservation because I did a lot of that while I was out there as well. So now, while it might have looked like I just had a great time in beautiful paradise for 6 months, I just want to point out that it wasn't all like this. It was really hard work. A lot of conservation work out in the field, if you're working with animals, for example, is really hard work. These are some of the camps that I lived in, for example. The middle picture at the top is an outdoor kitchen, which was great fun, but had all sorts of beasties like this big giant spider living in it. So you had to get used to being in nature and being around nature. In some of the camps, we didn't have any showers, we didn't have electricity. The bottom right image shows our compost toilet on one of the sites. It was an outdoor toilet because it was such a remote location on an island that they didn't have these facilities. So it's important to remember, if you do want to get into conservation in the field, then it's quite it's quite basic living, but really fun. And yes, that is a lizard in a mug. So all sorts of things like this went on when we were living in these camps. You had to get used to it, as I say. So when I came back after 6 months from Mauritius to Scotland, I had to go back and stay with family and search for jobs. And while I still loved working with animals, I had this passion for communicating with children in particular. So over the next few years, when I came back from Mauritius, I was really lucky to get various jobs, one of which was working in an aquarium, and one was working in a safari park running the education department. So my experience and volunteering of working with animals and children was paying off. I also worked as a tour guide in between this as well in a historic site. I had loads of different jobs just to make sure I could pay my bills. So as you say, you can see from these pictures, I've had lots of amazing experiences and worked with loads of really cool animals, but my main passion is educating people about them. And I've also spent some time in recent years working a lot with children's charities and connecting people with nature. So it's all got that common theme. So if I think again about what skills I developed lots of knowledge about animals, more hands-on experience working with zookeepers, ability to speak to large audiences, and also work with the media, so like TV and radio and online content, which is really important in today's world. I also developed a lot of skills in networking, which again is super, super important. So just nearly finished very quickly. The last thing I'm going to talk about is just my role now. So I am Youth Engagement Officer with the Marine Conservation Society. I'm part of the education team. So my job is to speak to young people across the whole of the UK and educate them about our work. Now, a lot of that is actually sitting behind a computer, doing a lot of admin, developing and designing fun content, and a lot of communication and emails sent. And so I've got to be really good at my admin as well and really good at planning. But all my skills from my past are really essential and really useful in my job. I work with, as I said, lots of young people across the whole of the UK. I have to work outdoors sometimes in all sorts of different weathers, and I have to be able to communicate with all sorts of different audiences while keeping on top of my very busy schedule, as I said. So all these little things I've picked up along the way have been really important. Now, the last point is just to illustrate that we at the Marine Conservation Society, we have over 110 staff. And even though everybody has this shared passion for marine conservation and nature, we have so many different roles and people with so many different backgrounds. So these are just some of the roles. For example, if you're really interested in IT or computing, you could work with us. If you're interested in editing, we've got an editor who works for our magazine. If you like art and design, you could become a graphic designer and work with an organisation like us. So again, it's just to emphasise there are all sorts of different roles across our organisation, and you can really play your part. And the main thing is we're a passionate bunch of young people who are super dedicated. So my top tips, if you're wanting to get into the field of conservation or you want to work in this area, is volunteer if you can, even if that's in a pet shop, at a farm, in a zoo, in a local park, anywhere you can. If you want to work outdoors and work with animals, for example, just start as soon as you can. Think of the skills you have and celebrate your uniqueness. It's essential that everybody plays their part in looking after the planet. So you are really an important part of that and you've got something to contribute. Network, chat to people, email people, follow people on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and look up different websites and educate yourself. And really try and choose something you do love because it's that passion that's essential. Keep educating yourself. You're always learning and I'm continually learning. And follow your dreams and the hard work will pay off. There's a lot of hard work involved, but it's really worth it. I think hopefully I've emphasised it's important. You don't need to be afraid to change. I've changed my direction quite a few times, but I've got out in nature as much as possible as well and really just reminded myself why I love this job. So the last little thing I'm going to show is actually that if you are interested in getting involved, there are loads of different ways which I can chat about maybe in the questions, but just look on our website and get in touch. But also if you're 13 to 25 across the whole of the UK, you could join our Youth Ocean Network, which is a network of young people really involved in helping to make a change for sea life. So last little thing I'm going to show you is you might be thinking, what do we actually have around about the UK shores? What do we have that's worth protecting? So I'll just show you this little video clip, and you can hopefully try and identify a few different animals in it. Thank you very much. I'll just hand back over to Lisa now to see if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Katie. Wow, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you for such an informative and interesting talk. And we hope our audience is more aware of what types of roles are available within the conservation world. I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Sophie, and she's got some questions she'd like to put to you. Thanks, Sophie.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so the first question I've got is, do I need to be good at science to go into conservation?
That's a good question. I think it really depends what area you want to go into. From my perspective, I actually didn't study science in higher level. At school, I studied it, it's at GCSE. But if you want to go into a scientific kind of route, like become a scientist or work in the labs, I would say definitely. But I think it's important to have a bit of a knowledge. But you can also educate yourself, you know, outside of school. You can try and learn all sorts about different topics outside of the classroom as well. If you want to get into marine conservation, I would say biology in particular would be quite useful. But the main thing is you've got that passion there, and you educate yourself on the different topics. But hopefully, as I've shown in the PowerPoint, that you know there are all sorts of different roles, and it's not all just scientific in conservation today.
Fantastic, thank you. So someone says, who is your conservation hero?
Oh, that's a good question. We obviously all love David Attenborough, I think. But actually, I think my dad, he doesn't work necessarily in conservation today, but my dad was one of the people who kind of inspired me to get outdoors and educated us all a lot growing up about nature. So I think that family kind of passion has definitely come through. But I think David Attenborough is such a great communicator, and he's done so much to help protect both our blue planet, but the entire planet as well.
Fantastic. So have you got any ambitions for the future?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've got so many different interests. You know, I love working in the marine conservation side of things, but I also love all of nature and getting people outdoors. So in my role, I'm really focused on getting young people outdoors, giving more young people the opportunity to spend time in nature at the beach or near if they live inland. So in terms of my role, I'm definitely have loads of ambition to connect with loads of young people across the UK. But I also am just constantly learning it as a person. I'm not a marine biologist, so every day when I'm working in this job, I am learning so much more from my colleagues and from the wider world. So I think it's important to I want to keep learning and keep being able to educate people on different topics.
Fabulous. Okay. So we've got another question come through. So I think before you said about there is lots of opportunity to work abroad. So if someone's asked how would I go about this if I wanted to work abroad?
Yeah, I think most of the opportunities are probably for when you're over 18. So maybe if you're younger than that, just start looking now. Start looking on different websites. I mean, I'm happy to share some afterwards if anyone's interested. Just keep an eye on different conservation organisations' websites. Look for different volunteer opportunities. It is very competitive. There's so many people that want to work in this field, and sometimes you can't afford to volunteer and go abroad, but there's usually all sorts of financial help available. So just getting in touch with someone like myself, I'm happy to email people and talk about these things and talk about some of my colleagues' experiences. So just reach out to people. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. But there are also, even though it's lovely in Mauritius, there's so much cool stuff in Britain. There's so many opportunities in your own backyard and in the UK. So look close to home as well, I would say. Start off by doing that, and then see if there are other opportunities maybe down the line.
Fantastic. Okay. What's your favourite part of the job?
My favourite part of the job is the people, both the staff, who are all lovely and super passionate, but mostly just the members of the public that I meet and the young people that I meet. I work with such an amazing group of young people across the whole of the UK who are so knowledgeable and so passionate about looking after our oceans. So it's definitely, that's the thing that inspires me, meeting all the different young people and trying to encourage them to play their part.
Great. So someone's asked, what's the most important issue in conservation?
Oh, I don't know. I think there are loads of different important issues. One of the things for me, again, because I work in education, is just awareness. There are all sorts of issues, marine pollution and as I've talked about, all the different problems our ocean faces. But I think just education and awareness, a lot of people don't know much about marine conservation because they've maybe loads of other things to think about in their day-to-day lives. So if I can play one little part in trying to educate people and inspire them, that raises awareness. Hopefully you guys who are all watching today will go away and talk about it, or speak to your family or speak to your friends about it, and that's all just help and raise awareness. So if you can do one thing today, it's tell a friend or tell a family member about what you've learned, and that's helping to spread the awareness.
Brilliant. Okay, I think maybe we've got time for just one more question. So we've got a question asking, so what skills do you need for your job in particular? I mean, I think you've kind of covered this, but maybe you could just
yeah, for my job, definitely I think the main skill is being able to communicate, being able to talk to all sorts of different people, but also being able to listen and work with people, because I work with all sorts of age ranges and with people with all sorts of different abilities, as I said, throughout my role. So even though I have an interest and a passion for the marine conservation, I'm still learning, as I say, and I'm learning every day. So the main thing I would say is be very good at communicating, but also very organized and being able to do a lot of admin work and work on a computer. And it's also quite a creative role. So I have that artistic eye, hopefully, that helps me design things and make things interesting to look at.
Okay, thank you ever so much for that, Katie. Okay, so that comes to the end of our questions. We have got talks going all this week, and I'm just put in the chat. So it's National Careers Week. And so if anybody wants to book for any of the other talks, then please find them and register on our website. Thank you very much then. Bye bye now.